I'm going to take you on a little journey of how I ended up working even more with paper than I probably thought I was going to end up doing. So when I first moved to Amsterdam, I was actually in advertising, and I moved at the end of 2008, and everything was all sunny and rosy, and then suddenly the recession hit, like 2 months into my job, and there literally wasn't anything to do at my job. So instead of freaking out that I'd probably relocated my whole life over for no reason, I decided to make something out of paper. Now, for me, moving to Amsterdam, it was just such a beautiful city, and it felt like a wonderful fairy tale with the architecture. So I thought, well, I used to work with paper when I was younger, and maybe I can, kind of go to my safe, happy place instead of stressing out about losing my job. So I took a picture of a building I cycle past every day on the way to work, and I twisted it in Photoshop and decided to make that instead to learn more about a material that I used to work with when I was a little kid. And I didn't really know where this was going to go at the time, but it just weirdly felt like the right thing to do. And I was really surprised by how much paper could hold this unusual form. And the more I was working with it, the more it was quite easy to work with, and it was quite easy to build quite a complex shape with it. So I was really enthused by what I was learning and wanted to kind of learn more about it. So I ended up leaving advertising and getting a job as a champagne waitress in a bar in Amsterdam and funding an even bigger project. And I thought, okay, let's learn even more about this material. What else could it do? How can it work with color? And I thought, well, if I've studied advertising, maybe if I want to move into something else, I'm going to have to create a really big project to sell myself to new potential companies. So I decided to make an animation, and I went about doing this in my living room. And this was another building that I was inspired by in Amsterdam, which is just opposite the Rijksmuseum. I also twisted it in Photoshop and made that as well. And then you can see my hand at the top left-hand corner of the building to give you an idea of scale. So I was just at this time in the living room by myself and just going on this warm, fuzzy feeling that you're doing the right thing, you're doing the right thing, you're doing the right thing. And when I finished, I emailed a bunch of production companies hoping someone would see that I maybe had some talent in what I was doing. And so I was still champagne waitressing at the time, and then a few months later, I get an email asking if I'd ever worked with toilet paper before. Now, I know for a lot of people this isn't like an exciting move or a new venture to go into, but I was really enthusiastic. I was like, could I make something out of toilet paper? How would it work? I knew paper was really good at standing tall, but would toilet paper work or wouldn't it? And we actually pitched against a bunch of digital companies who were suggesting to do this TV animation in CGI. And because I made it for real and proved we could make it for real, managed to capture this unique softness that was present by working with the real material. So then I went from another toilet paper commercial to a second toilet paper commercial just by chance. And someone in London then thought I was the toilet paper specialist, which is probably the saddest title I think I've ever been given. But then, excitingly, my next job was for a car commercial. But then here was when I started to get more interested in how much paper could do. And I started to work with different people in the field. And we were working with people creating these files in Maya, and then we'd print out all the nets and we'd be assembling. So all of these are handmade, and it's all stop frame animation. So you take a picture of each of the individual elements. But I started to really see the potential with this material, and the more I started to do, the more I realized how much it could do. So then from this, I was invited to go to South by Southwest, which is an interactive festival in Austin, to do a job for 3M. And they wanted to show off this material called Novak fluid, which is the fluid in the tank. And this is what they use in sprinklers. So when they go off, federal documents aren't damaged or nothing happens to them. And they actually use this material to cool down server rooms. So instead of having really air-conned rooms, they just lower the servers into this fluid. So I was to build this structure that we were going to lower into the tank and show that nothing was going to happen to this paper structure. So we were filling this liquid up around it, and I'm like, oh God, is it going to hold its form? But you can see it's looking a little wet, but nothing happened to it. And it just stayed completely as it was, but just submerged into this fluid. So I was blown away by, wow, it can do more than I even give it credit for. And then I was asked to create a paper rocket. that was going to go off into the stratosphere. So I was like, all right, will this also survive? So this little rocket is about this big, and we attached it to a weather balloon that was like this big, and it got ripped out of my hands with the pressure. And this weather balloon would grow to 8 meters wide and travel up in the air as it did so over Germany. And then the more it grew, the balloon, then the higher the rocket went. And the little paper rocket went all the way through the clouds up to like 38,000 meters, which was pretty impressive. I mean, it was way higher than I thought it was going to go. But it did not survive its crash landing back to Earth, because after the weather balloon goes to 8 meters and then pops, and then the little rocket, it was all caught on videotape, and it was really tragic, smashed down to Earth and just crashed on the floor. But it did manage to go quite far. So from here, I was like, okay, what else can I do with paper? And I was like, well, if toilet paper created like that sense of softness, could I work with another kind of paper to create a different kind of feeling? So I made a whole series with sandpaper and played with people's feelings with how they imagine themselves interacting with this material. Also inspired by Amsterdam. So all these experiments started to work, and I was like, okay, well then maybe I can use paper to do something even bigger. Maybe I can use paper to kind of calm the terror of a guillotine. Like, we made this 3.8 meter high structure, and I covered it completely in paper, and we wanted to know if we take something really common that people know, but cover it in paper, would people then trust us and go into it and interact with it? And we actually had people lining up to go into this machine. People were saying, can I go in next? Which I'm sure has never been said in front of a guillotine before, ever. But this experiment we did in Amsterdam, and then we took it to London, and I put it on the internet, and a museum in Switzerland found it, and they said, we're going to get the blade from the French Revolution, so would you be interested in showing your artwork opposite that? So we were like, of course. And to really juxtapose against this cold metal blade, I wanted to create a really beautiful guillotine to really just show the difference between the two. And it was going to be hours of work creating thousands of butterflies and roses to cover this thing. And when I'm doing something really repetitive and really laborious, I tend to watch documentaries or films just to stop myself going crazy in the studio by myself for hours alone. And I happened to be watching a documentary on female genital mutilation. I know, and it was something I found out about when I was at art school, because I was researching for a ceramics project, and I was learning about fractionally gradient material. So I typed in FGM, which was the acronym of fractionally gradient material, expecting to learn about ceramics, and a whole world of female genital mutilation opened up. And I think when you find out about something so shocking in such a way, it always stays with you. So from this point, it was always something I researched and wanted to do something for, but hadn't quite worked out the best way to approach it. So when I was making these roses, I had a moment where I looked down and I was like, if I just make a couple of little changes, maybe I could use it to illustrate female genital mutilation instead. And a few months later, I returned back to that thought. So I was like, if I can use paper to really calm the terror of a guillotine, maybe I can help open up dialogues using paper in something that's really quite complex, but do it in a way that wouldn't be too off-putting, but still educate people on the subject. And the more I researched, the more I realized it was really complicated. And the fact is, 3 million girls a year are subjected to some form of female genital mutilation. That's 8,200 girls a day. And then I was also learning about sexual education in the Western world, and there wasn't really enough education in that either, with labiaplasty, which is a cosmetic surgery on the female genitalia, had risen 16% over the last year and doubled in girls under the age of 18. So I was like, well, maybe then it looks like there's a bigger subject here. So then I decided to create a project that would highlight all the differences in the female anatomy. So initially I asked my friends to send me in pictures of themselves for myself to make, to then create this online platform where I was going to illustrate, look how different the body is, and get more people talking about it by breaking the taboos, and then open up a world into female genital mutilation. So I did create this platform online, and then this year I ended up working with Plan Netherlands to create this film. but we were able to educate people enough in the subject matter, and it got shared, or it got viewed over 2 million times, and it went from the Netherlands into Belgium as well, which I think for such a complex subject, you probably think no one would really be open to watching something, but we were able to illustrate it in quite a soft enough way that was still hard-hitting. So then I become really interested in paper as a tool for communication and really telling bigger ideas. So I was asked to be a part of Coda, which is a museum in Apeldoorn, and they do this biennial paper exhibition, and it's called Coda Paper Art. So I thought it'd be really interesting to then do something completely different in this space. Obviously everyone's going to be showing paper sculptures, but I was like, okay, how can I tell a different kind of story? And I'm really interested in virtual reality as a tool because it is starting to come about more and more people are starting to use it. So I thought it'd be quite interesting to build this ice world and then burn it away before it even made it into the museum. So I made these giant sculptures that are about 3 meter high to about 1.5 meter high, and we filmed them against a black screen, and we filmed them all burning away. Now, random fact, paper really didn't want to burn. I thought it was going to be a really easy project just to sell on light, and then we'd film it, but as you know in production, or if you do things for real, there's always surprises, and things don't actually work out the way you think they're going to. But we were filming all these sculptures burning away against a black backdrop, and then what we decided to do was if we shot it against black, we were then going to superimpose them into the museum. Now, the dream was to actually shoot them burning in the museum, but obviously for health and safety reasons, that plan was not really what they wanted. So then I collected all this ash from the remainder of our sculpture and put them into the museum itself. And on the ground in the museum, when you walk into the little section, you just see the ash of what the sculpture used to be, and then hanging is a VR headset. And you put on the VR headset, and then suddenly then you're back in the room where you just were standing, and then you watch the sculpture grow back from the ground back up again. So I'm interested in this idea of when things disappear or if they do become extinct, people will sell you this virtual world of you can re-see the icebergs again, you can re-see the rainforest. So you put on the glasses and you really see it come back to life. But then as soon as you take the glasses off again, it's gone because in the real world, it has actually been burnt away. So for me, I think I'm still really exploring and learning even more about this material. And I'm really excited by the more I keep exploring, the more I keep collaborating, I find even more worlds are opening up. And for me, the first job, going in my living room, building these little animations, to now, going to bigger cities and working with more people to create, this was a paper version of Seattle. You start to learn more tricks of the trade and more ways to do production quicker and production faster. And lighting is also an amazing tool, to build this set. This is 10 meters long, but with really good lighting, it kind of could look like it was CG or even potentially real. So I'm just really excited to keep exploring with this material and start telling new stories. And for me, I've just done this project, which is going to come out next week, to look for International Snogging Day. So maybe you'll start seeing me passing it around. But for me, I was like, it's a good idea to explore snogging in a new way, to tell a new story for people. So I actually made then giant plug heads and put them on my friends. And the idea was then when people snog or have a connection and kiss, then they end up turning on electrical appliances. So you can see here, this is them connecting together. And I really love using paper in a way that doesn't necessarily show that it's paper. For me, it's just a really quick tool to build with to tell a bigger story. And in this case, there was the foam board, and I had to work out, okay, how big do I need to build the front so that these prongs can go in and not stab this person in the face? It's in the other one, or how big do I need to get it? But it's been an interesting time. So you see that, and I'm like, okay, we need to build it this big. And then I had to get people to come in for my plug fittings and work out how to hide the hair and everything. So I'm really looking forward to keep exploring on this journey. And it's been 8 years so far, and it's been a lot of different projects coming in. And from where I first started at my desk, building a little house to try and learn about the material, to now using that I can bring it into new technologies like VR. And I'm really looking forward to merging with the digital world to try and not to stay completely analog, because I think when you create these more complex stories, you then end up in a world that's quite rich and can tell these bigger stories to reach people online in a digital world. Thank you.